Very few characters in the larger Mario franchise have as bizarre and unique a career path as King K. Rool. I mean, there was a point in time where this guy was Donkey Kong's answer to Bowser, appearing in game after game after game, and the highly coveted step from Donkey Kong's adventures to Mario spin-offs felt within reach. And then it all just suddenly stopped. The entire Donkey Kong series took a dip, admittedly, but even when it sparingly returned, King K. Rool and his critter army were suddenly more often than not sidelined, something that feels utterly inconceivable to ever happen to, say, Bowser, for example. And yet, somehow, through what appears to be the sheer will of the fans, we have recently entered a second, or dare I say third, golden age of King K. Rool. Not many characters can say they have had a rise, a fall, then another rise again, then another fall, and then another rise, but the Kremling King is one of them. Even if his portrayal has certainly changed over time. As I'm gonna assume you know, King K. Rool made his grand debut in Donkey Kong Country, the game that really established the Donkey Kong series and many of the series' tropes as they still exist today. Think the entire Kong family, the Kremlings, animal buddies, and the entire aesthetic of Donkey Kong, as has kinda gone unchanged until literally a month ago when Donkey Kong Bananza released. Despite being a king and having seemingly zero actual design elements that reference this fact, it appears during his early years that King K. Rool was always meant to have a certain pirate aesthetic, with of course Gangplank Galleon being the best example, his trademark ship and at this point theme song, where he is first seen and fought. But in his second Donkey Kong Country game, Diddy's Conquest, the theme is only further amplified, complete with a redesign and even alias, Captain K. Rool. This is another key element of King K. Rool's character that has essentially been completely MIA for decades now. His tendency to wear costumes and appear under aliases. Captain K. Rool was the first, and in hindsight a bit of a weird one, considering that, like I said, a pirate theme was already quite pronounced in the original DKC when he was just his kingly self, so the sudden captain name and look feels a little redundant, but no well. The same definitely cannot be said for his third look of choice, that of a crazed scientist in Baron K. Roolenstein from DKC3. Well, this look itself definitely feels like something Nintendo wouldn't go for today in a million billion years. The propeller pack King K. Rool was still commonly seen with today actually hails from this game, so to an extent Baron K. Roolenstein has continued to influence the design of K. Rool to this day. Also noteworthy is that according to the manual of Donkey Kong Land 3, DKC3's Game Boy port basically, this title is ancestral to King K. Rool, implying that he may actually not be a king at all, but rather a baron. That would be quite a twist, right? That King K. Rool's name and look is actually that of Baron K. Roolenstein, and that King K. Rool is the one that's an alias and costume, just like Captain K. Rool. Now that would be a plot twist. One that really doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but it isn't impossible. Anyway, moving on, we have DK64, which puts King K. Rool back in his familiar kingly garb, which sounds logical today, but you have to imagine that at this point in time, the king has only ever actually appeared as king once in a video game, just as much as his captain and baron looks. Supplementary material has always followed his appearance in the original Donkey Kong Country though, even if they were released at a time where the sequels were the most recent titles. There is a Donkey Kong Country series of books, where 2 out of 3 installments use his kingly design, which the infamous Donkey Kong Country cartoon also uses. It is however worth pointing out that a character original to the cartoon series, known as Captain Scurvy, appears to not so subtly be partially inspired by Captain K. Rool in regards to his role. The cartoon would also be the first and really only time that King K. Rool is properly voiced, with the role handled by Ben Campbell, a pretty low-profile voice actor without many other significant roles. Anyway, back to the games, with DK64 close to release, bringing his kingly look back to the game consoles as well. His new plan in this game is to use the Blast-O-Matic to blow up DK Island, getting rid of his rivals once and for all. This marks the very first time King K. Rool's motivations have nothing to do with bananas, as was his original motivation and a pretty significant mystery for decades, since, you know, crocodiles don't eat bananas. There have been unofficial sources stating that King K. Rool does actually want to eat the bananas, with others saying he had his eye on the horde to starve the Kongs to death. But Bananza confirms that K. Rool does indeed like bananas, as long as they are spoiled and rotten. To each their own. King K. Rool's portrayal in DK64 follows along with what was already kinda happening in DKC3, with K. Rool being less of his own unique character and more so a parody of sorts of famous villains from pop culture. Rare did this more around this time, it's in Banjo-Kazooie and Conker as well for example, and K. Rool came under its influence as well with the step to the Nintendo 64. For example, he now has a pet Claptrap that he keeps with him like James Bond villain Blofeld has a cat, and his sounds and mannerisms are very breathy, clearly inspired by Darth Vader. Personally, I'm not such a huge fan of this portrayal myself. I don't think it suits King K. Rool a lot. He never felt like a calm, collected and menacing presence to me, more like a brute, slightly insane and capable of anything, which doesn't really fit with the inspirations used here. Compare it to Bowser, who definitely feels more composed, and I don't think this was the right fit for K. Rool personally. What definitely does feel more up his wheelhouse is the final battle, where K. Rool for the first time switches personas and aliases mid-game, introducing us to King Crusher K. Rool, a heavyweight boxer who takes on all 5 Kongs in the boxing arena. This may not feel super unique anymore nowadays, where it is quite common for final bosses in the Mario series to be, say, Bowser but different, but I think the way King K. Rool does it here is quite unique compared to Bowser. This isn't K. Rool high on some special superpower, or using some immensely powerful form. It's simply him after an outfit swap, with a new name that is more based on the trope of wrestlers using aliases rather than this actually being a new form of the same character, if you get what I mean. It feels very unique to K. Rool, this style of behavior, and it fits what I mentioned before, his more deranged, chaotic style. But despite K. Rool now living his best life and having a clear, well carved out niche within not just the Donkey Kong but also Mario franchise, the turn of the century would spell trouble for the Kremling King. It's very easy to blame this down period on Microsoft's purchase of Rare. As I'm sure you know, they became the new owner of the company that developed basically every Donkey Kong game since its SNES revival, and as such, are King K. Rool's creators. And to an extent, of course this move wasn't in K. Rool's and really the entire DK series' favor. Diddy Kong Pilot, a title slated to release on the GBA as a follow-up to Diddy Kong Racing, was meant to have K. Rool as a playable character for the very first time, but instead the game became a Banjo-Kazooie themed game, with that series' villain Gruntilda quite literally taking the spot that was meant for K. Rool. However, this idea that the purchase of Rare doomed K. Rool is inaccurate in my opinion. Diddy Kong was similarly a Rare created character, but it was literally around this time that he started to get more and more appearances in Mario spin-offs, like Mario Golf Toadstool Tour, Mario Kart Double Dash and Mario Power Tennis. But whereas Diddy thrived and essentially found a new home due to the new lack of Donkey Kong Country games, and his critters were chosen to be goalies in Mario Strikers, King K. Rool was heavily pushed to the side. But he wasn't yet forgotten. Donkey Konga was a rhythm game using the DK bongos, the living proof Nintendo had no clue what to do with Donkey Kong without Rare, and while his role is extremely minor, K. Rool does make an appearance here. Bash K. Rool is a minigame that is essentially just whack-a-mole, except with the Kremling King, making this hardly a major canon appearance, but at the very least it's a sign of life, and a sign that King K. Rool is still seen as the rival for Donkey Kong over at Nintendo. But for how long? Donkey Kong Jungle Beat released in 2004 and is, bizarre control scheme aside, a Donkey Kong platformer by all accounts, seemingly the prime opportunity to bring K. Rool back in a Nintendo-led title. But that didn't happen. In fact, very little from the Rare Donkey Kong Country games makes an appearance here, to the point you can argue this title deliberately goes out of its way to separate itself from those prior successes. Even DK is portrayed quite differently, being much more aggressive and wild. The game introduces new jungle buddies, which are, but also definitely are not, animal buddies, and rather than having DK fight evil crocodiles, there are now evil fellow Kongs, birds, elephants and pigs to face off against. But anything that as much as reminds of the Donkey Kong Country games is absent, to the point even Diddy doesn't make an appearance. It's odd and it's not a good sign, but it isn't the end yet. The latter half of the 2000s would mark a surprising renaissance for King K. Rool, seemingly coming out of absolute nowhere. It all started with DK King of Swing, one of the last larger Mario series games for GBA. It was developed by Paon, who with this move became the surprising new home of Donkey Kong for the time being. Paon wasn't and isn't a big name in gaming, and while they did make a significant amount of titles ever since being founded in 1999, none of them really stand out as something recognizable. Their brief reign over the Donkey Kong series is easily the most noteworthy thing this company has ever done, and it was a weird, ultimately unsuccessful era. But at least they respected the hell out of King K. Rool. In King of Swing, he's the main villain, simple as that, and he's even playable in the multiplayer Jungle Jam mode, making this his first actual playable appearance. 2 years later, in 2007, Paon would continue rapping the Good King twice over even, including him as a playable character in DK Barrel Blast, which may not exactly be good, but does make the Kremlings a group fitting to rival the Kong family, as well as DK Jungle Climber, the sequel to King of Swing, where K. Rool is once again the main villain. Interesting to note is that in the English version of this game, K. Rool says he hates bananas during the final showdown, another chapter to the inconsistent relationship between the Kremlings and bananas. But this line is actually not accurate to the Japanese original, where K. Rool says he simply plans to cause havoc. At the end of Jungle Climber, which has a finale set in space, we see King K. Rool being dragged back by force towards the familiar DK and supposedly Mario planet, and as far as seemingly canon appearances go, that is where his story would end. But the late 2000s weren't over yet, and we have left to discuss one of the most pivotal moments in King K. Rool's career, his Mario series debut. For some unexplainable reason, Mario Super Sluggers, to this day still the most recent Mario baseball game, is really the only game in the entire Mario franchise to truly merge the Mario and Donkey Kong series. Cranky Kong, Dixie Kong, Funky Kong, Tiny Kong, Critters, and yes, even King K. Rool are playable in this game, marking the first and only time the King has ever been seen in a Mario title. It's a landmark moment, one that at the time, I, as a young teen, fully expected to mean K. Rool was gonna be a future mainstay. He wasn't in, say, Mario Kart Wii, but he would certainly be in the next one, right? Same with other Mario spin-off titles. It felt like a moment where Nintendo had opened the floodgates, and I never considered they might just as well close them again. But hoo boy, close them they did. Or maybe rather, Retro Studios did. Because after the weird Paon developed titles, they would be the ones to bring Donkey Kong Country back in all its glory, and while the two titles they developed for Wii and Wii U, Country Returns and Tropical Freeze, are phenomenal games, they don't have K. Rool, or any Critters for that matter, going for their own original new brand of villains, which, let's be honest, haven't been able to win the hearts of the fans to the same extent. While a cold hard answer as to why King K. Rool was excluded from these games has never been given, an answer by former retro dev Brian Walker when asked this question seems to imply the reason was as simple as that Retro wanted to take things in their own direction, and not just rehash everything that previously existed. Personally, I think that's valid, but also something that not necessarily was needed, especially since it has been established thrice over that King K. Rool can easily adapt to new personas and aliases. He could have easily worked in tandem with a new style and look that Retro came up with. But alas, that didn't happen, and for more than a decade now, we have had a functioning, working Donkey Kong Country series without King K. Rool. But I'm sure I don't have to tell you what happened next. Due to sheer fan support and definitely nothing else, King K. Rool suddenly made his grand return to an actual video game, and not in a small one like DK King of Swing either. Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, arguably the biggest stage a gaming character can reach, made the King a playable newcomer, complete with Sakurai voice fake-out in his reveal. It was exactly what the character and the fanbase needed. Not just an appearance in a video game somewhere, but an actual massive AAA title, and one that is known for representing all facets of a character and showing respect to its history at that. It was genuinely the perfect platform for King K. Rool to make his return, and without a shadow of a doubt played a huge part in what would happen next. Because yeah, let's not beat around the bush, if you're watching this, it surely hasn't passed you by that King K. Rool makes his grand return in Donkey Kong Bananza. To my own surprise, the game very much goes out of its way to even establish a possible reason for King K. Rool's absence, with the King acknowledging it's been a while and hinting that even though we have literally never seen or heard about any of the locations in Bananza before, the Forbidden Lair is where he has secretly been this entire time, alongside with his Kremling crew. Just like with Smash Ultimate prior, this game really makes sure the legacy of King K. Rool is respected and not overlooked. I mean, they could have easily made the mistake of introducing K. Rool as if he was a semi-new character. Nintendo has done stuff like that before, where the past is barely acknowledged. And while I do still believe they could have gone further with it than they did here, King K. Rool is most certainly not portrayed here as something new, as something we as players have never seen. He uses familiar moves, he barely introduces himself, his theme song returns, it's great, it's a phenomenal return, capped off by unironically one of the best final sequences I've ever played in a video game. But what we are now all dying to know is, what is the future looking like? Is this another late 2000s, where K. Rool suddenly sees an uptick in usage, only to then completely disappear again? Or is this finally his Bowser moment, so to speak? Where he becomes the main enemy of Donkey Kong in not just a possible Bananza sequel, but also any potential movies, future country games and the like. Will he perhaps even finally make that Mario Kart debut Team Me thought was inevitable? It does feel more likely than ever, that's for sure, especially with his new voice actor Tsugo Mogami credited in Mario Kart World despite not doing anything in the game. At the moment, wink wink. That said, he is also the voice of Speward and Mollusk Lanceur from Mario Odyssey, so who knows, maybe we'll see one of them make an admittedly very surprise appearance. But no, to get back on track here, I would be absolutely shocked if King K. Rool isn't here to stay now. His return in DK Bananza felt so important, so carefully crafted, to the point he literally takes over from Void Kong as the main villain, that I cannot see them putting him back on the shelf where they found him. It also definitely helps that it was Nintendo directly including him, rather than say Retro Studios or Paron, like in the past. And even from a business standpoint, it's just sensible. Nintendo is clearly trying to build up the profile of the Donkey Kong series again, so it can be a true pillar of their stable once more, just like it was all the way back when Rare was at the helm. The name Donkey Kong remains massive in popular culture, but the series itself has definitely lost popularity and relevance over the course of the decades. And the best way to build that back up is by establishing a clear, universal world for the character. And one part of that is a recognizable, likable, reoccurring villain. A role King K. Rool fits much better than Lord Frederick, Void Kong, or whatever new villain they create next time. So yeah, for the first time in like 20 years, I can say I genuinely feel positive about the future of the Kremling King. He was a star, then hit rock bottom, and now he has become a full-fledged legacy act. To many years of Kremling craziness. What are your thoughts on the return of King K. Rool? And what do you think his future holds? Share it in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, please consider giving it a like and subscribe to the channel to stay updated on all my future Mario content coming up. For now, thanks for watching and enjoy the rest of your day.